Okay, this is a video today for my weird ones, my people who have never fit in. I tried to record this video yesterday because I have a message for you. And part of it includes sharing a little bit about my personal story about how I have always been a little bit different, maybe a lot different since I originally came in. And I wasn't able to post the video as a way too vulnerable. I watched it back and it was just it wasn't a good first take, and I don't, get obsessed with that kind of thing, but I'm going to try again this time. So this is a video for the people who have never felt like you've really fit in, especially not to mainstream or pop culture or consensus reality. And so a lot of people who come to me without me even having to say it fall into this category. And so people who come to work with me individually or in groups, certainly the people who are in the Visionaries membership community, we all are very like-minded in this way, whether we align or not align on the state of the world. Most of us kind of sort of do in our own way. It's more about the fact that we just haven't ever really fit into pop culture. And so the number one thing that I hear from my people, time and time and time again, especially over the last, 5 years, I would say, is that they have trouble finding their people. They feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel lonely, they feel like they can't actually find the people that they want to relate to, is how I'll say it. And so after hearing that so often, for years, especially since 2020, I decided to create the Visionaries membership community, which I'll talk a little bit about today. It's not really the main gist of this video, but that's the whole reason why I started the membership community. And so it's just been so incredibly nourishing for those of us in there to gather, as well as the people who also participate in my smaller groups. I also do have a new group program that's coming next week, starting Friday, January 23rd. I'll post a link to that. It's called The New Era. And so whether you participate in smaller groups or the larger community, there's lots of opportunities. But today I just wanted to share a little bit of my story of growing up, just so you can get to know me better. And I don't think I've ever shared to this degree. And that's part of the reason why yesterday the video felt so vulnerable for me, and it wasn't easy for me because I'm actually a very private person and I don't usually share private personal details of my life unless there is some purpose, right? I'm not someone who's out there just sharing and wanting all these eyes on me and attention at all. I'm very introverted, I'm very private. And yet at the same time, my all of my work around relationships has come directly from my personal lived experience, especially with what happened now 12 years ago, which was the collapsing of my marriage and that 20-year relationship. And so that's why I tend to focus on romantic relationships and how we can really, really change the game there. That's what I'm passionate about. But everything that I teach about relationships is actually applicable to pretty much every relationship, unless I'm talking about sexuality, the principles of relationships that I teach are definitely applicable across the board. So today I'm going to share just a little bit about my story of coming in super weird, to the point where I've been realizing recently that as a kid, with the amount of social stuff that I had going on, I know for sure I would have been probably diagnosed as being on the spectrum. Later, as a psychologist, when I was especially working in the schools, one of my main responsibilities was actually diagnosing people, not just on the autism spectrum, but also ADHD and all the other things, especially things that showed up in terms of what would impact learning. And so I don't do that anymore. I stepped away from the traditional paradigm and from diagnosing. And that's a whole conversation. I'm also not necessarily someone who throws everything in the garbage. I've had a journey around that. I should probably record a separate video with where I'm at and where I stand on labels. But I just wanted to let you in a little bit on like who I am so you can get to know me better, especially if you're not familiar. But beyond sharing a little nuggets here and there of my own personal story, this is really for the people who can relate and who've never fit in, because I'm going to assure you, one of the intentions of me coming on today is to assure you that now is our time. There's a reason why we actually incarnated as so different, right? People who have never fit in, and why. It's been one of the hardest things that I even continue to this day that I struggle with to this day, although I've made a lot of progress in the realms of relationships and socially. But there's certainly unique challenges that those of us who haven't ever felt like we really fit in have had to deal with. I mean, certainly, as I mentioned before, loneliness, not being able to relate to people, um, social awkwardness to the point where I can't, like, even well into my adult life, I can't tell you how many times I've stepped away from a social interaction, just being like, what the hell is wrong with me? And just like the shame and the just sheer discomfort from, not knowing how to actually navigate your typical social interactions. And although I've definitely gotten better with practice to be able to just like live and exist in this world, it still sometimes is a challenge. So I don't want to skip over that part. I don't want to skip over that part. I also am one of those people that loves to just go deep. Like I'm not really interested in small talk. I know that a lot of people who are drawn to my work, we're the same. We don't find usefulness in talking about things that don't really matter. And so that's another thing that I've had to learn to at least lean into sometimes, because not everybody wants to just go right in. And so there is like a positive aspect of actually learning how to do it to some extent, right? But obviously there's some people who really have difficulty going deep, and that's a whole other conversation. So in addition to letting you in a little bit, I'll start to share about my childhood and teenage years in a moment. But the main point is for you to understand that, like, it's our time. It's our time right now. And not only is it our time to step up to the plate and really actually activate our missions in a way, but we have to do it in community. We have to do it in groups. And so I'm very passionate about this. And I know one of the reasons why this video was inspired was because Aquarius season is starting in a couple of days. It's starting January 19th. I'm recording this on the 17th, and Aquarius is super different out of the box, the revolutionary, or I prefer evolutionary archetype that's here to completely change the game. And so from day one, the way that I have been passionate about relationships is that we are here to do them very differently. So in the new era, the smaller group program that's starting next week, this is what we're going to start with month one. As we move through Aquarius, we're really going to align with this idea that we are the renegades. That's actually the subtitle of the first month of the program as we navigate through Aquarius. But this zooms out way beyond just Aquarius season, which is from the end of January to the end of February, because we're entering into this larger age of Aquarius. And so the other thing that always comes to mind when I think about the archetype of Aquarius is community and friendship, and how, especially when we're trying to actually actively co-create this new paradigm, this new way of doing relationships, by definition, we have to do it in groups. And so the challenge with the people who come to me who always say, where are my people? I can't relate with people, is that like they're attempting to put some of the relationship work into practice, some of the principles of conscious relationships and all of the way that I teach and talk about relationships. They're attempting to put it into practice, but they don't have anybody to put it into practice with. And while it's true that there's a lot that we can do within ourselves, right? Ultimately, with the new paradigm of relationships, we need people that we can practice with. So that, at bare minimum, the visionaries, the membership community that you can jump in at any time. You can go in and out at any time based on your free will. That's always available for $33 a month. And so that is, at this point, there's about 50 people in that group. We have weekly group calls. That's the larger membership community. I've gotten a couple of questions over the past week by people who are confused with the group options. That's always open, always available, and I would love to have you. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. But what I'm also talking about right now in terms of us doing the deep work on Aquarius is the smaller group program that's going to last for 3 months called the New Era. So there was a little confusion, so I just wanted to say that. So this is our time, and I just wanted to share just a little bit deeper in terms of who I am and where I came from so you can get to know me better. This is where I had a hard time yesterday because I was like, oh man, this is so vulnerable. It's so personal. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but what I will say is that, from the time I came in, when I was very small, I mean, I had, first of all, intense social anxiety. I could not look people in the eye for a long time, and that actually lasted for quite some time, honestly, well into teenage years. Even to this day, sometimes I have difficulty with eye contact with people. And it was hard for me to participate in relationships and participate socially. It's kind of like a combination of nature and nurture. This is the case for most of us. It's not one or the other. It's like I probably came in with these innate characteristics that are from so many different influences for all of us, right? But like it was just part of my innate personality of just being super shy, quiet, introverted, had difficulty socially, but also the layer on top of it of childhood trauma and also some neglect because I was left alone all the time as a kid. And so my memories of childhood were basically just like me in my room for I don't even know where anybody was, right? It was this thing where I was left alone quite a bit. And so when I was starting to really heal my relationship stuff later in life, one of the first things that I was led back to was this whole idea of like, oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't really have the opportunity to be socialized back then. And so that definitely impacted me. And so this is where I say, knowing what I know now about, being on the spectrum and all of the diagnosing that I did, I know for sure that I would have been diagnosed with that. And I would say that's not actually accurate because it was more of like pretty intense social anxiety. Let me just pause and take a sip of water. So it was very difficult for me when I was placed into school to relate with other kids. I just didn't really know how to do it. So, like, just on a skill level, there was difficulty there. There's also just the fact that I've always been like kind of someone who, how do I want to say this? There's been part of me since I was very small that was kind of like this wise, I don't know what you want to say, old soul or something, but I was really kind of in this state of shock and almost horror at the state of the world from a very, very young age. So I did a lot of observation and observing of adults and of people and just of how the state of the world was going. And I was in complete shock and horror. And so I just did not understand, right? There was something that I knew early on where I was just like, what is going on here? So that also made it very difficult for me to relate to people because I just couldn't, I didn't know what was going on, and no one seemed to be understanding or paying attention. And I guess what you could say when I heard the phrase consensus reality, years later, I was like, that's what it was. Like, I've never really fit in to that. And it's like, I haven't even been able to pretend that I can fit in, right? And so I've always been somebody who has never been interested in pop culture or let alone can relate to it. And so for those of us who have never been able to, it makes things hard socially because you actually just don't have that much in common with people. So I just, on so many levels socially, I had all of these different challenges and barriers. And so elementary school was really, really hard for me. I'm actually glad though that my mother put me in school because I think it would have been way, way, way worse if I actually didn't have that social exposure. Because even though it was difficult for me for many years, I didn't actually have my first best friend until fourth grade. Even though it was hard for me, I have to be honest that it was the best thing for me socially. And so even though it took a long time, by the time I entered into middle school, I had finally kind of fallen into a group of friends. And so, and also in high school, had quite a big group of friends as well. And so my friends were always, especially in high school and college, I hung out with the people who always were out of the box, who were always alternative. And in high school, especially going through teenage years, maybe some of you can relate, but that's when like this impulse within me got really turned up because you can even just say normal people going through teenage phases, that's the time where you question everything. But for me, it was like really amplified, right? And so my first romantic relationship, my first ever boyfriend in high school, we had this epic, deep 2-year relationship. And he was actually an Aquarius through and through. And he was a total anarchist, like for real. And so I was hanging out with, the kids who were reading the anarchist cookbook and the punk rock scene, and like music was a huge part of my life and my identity back then. And I was into all of the alternative stuff. And so fast forward, I think I was about 18 years old when somebody handed me the William Cooper book. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this one. This was probably around, let's see, late 90s. The book was called Behold a Pale Horse. And someone handed this to me and whispered, if you buy this at the bookstore, you get put on the FBI like blacklist or something. You get put on a list. So I opened the book and I read it and I just wasn't surprised, right? This was a book that was all about conspiracy theories, and I was, late teenager. I had already been prepped, right, in terms of just my natural innate sense that something was really, really wrong with the world. I don't really feel like I ever bought into government up to that point. And I already had been exposed to a lot of alternative viewpoints through the music I was listening to and just, the kids I was hanging out with, and all of the anarchy and all of it, right? And so, yeah, that was a really kind of intense run, right? And so there was a lot of pretty off the deep end exploration as it goes for so many of us when we're teenagers. But there was also a very, very dark aspect to it because I got heavily involved in drugs and alcohol back then for a good stretch of years. And so, I just wanted to share that that's kind of where my background has come from, where I've just never really fit in. I understand now that it's actually such a blessing. I mean, thank God when 2020 rolled around, like I wasn't surprised, right? I wasn't surprised. And although I had some really challenging personal things go on that year, like my mom passed away and there was other things personally that I was navigating that made that year insane, right? On top of everything else that was going on. I didn't have the added destabilization that so many people went through. And like, if you're listening and you are one of those people, like, I'm sending like so much love to you because I can't even imagine how difficult it was. But for me, it wasn't new, right? It wasn't new. When I did go down that rabbit hole when I was like 18, I think 17, 18 years old, I went down the rabbit holes for a while and it really took me into a dark place. So I really understand how that can happen. And I just remember, not feeling safe in this world, and also understanding somehow I was able to pull myself out of kind of like the black pill thing because I just couldn't function in the world. And so I also knew that even when I was very young, I was like, there has to be some way that we can understand this knowledge, but also be able to exist in this world. And so that's just a little bit about me and my background. And so a lot of people in my community, because of the collaborations that I've done with Laura Matsu and Bernhard Gunther from their awesome community. When I was, this was a couple years ago, I was guest teaching on relationships. So grateful in their Embodied Soul Awakening course. I had gone through it myself. And so, like, a lot of people in my community found me through that. And then I was also on Here for the Truth with Joel Rafiti and Yerasimos a couple years ago as well. So I do have a lot of people who are kind of like in the like, the alternative, not in consensus reality, some, truths kind of stuff. However, I will just say with where I am right now with everything, I've kind of pulled away from it. Like it's been so interesting for me to watch that whole movement, and it's nuanced, right? It's not all good or bad, right? It's obviously nuanced, but for the most part, I do see that it's been kind of corrupted. There's like a lot of, obviously, with everything that's been happening, there's quite a lot going on in terms of like trickery, right? And stuff that has been there even since when I was a teenager, getting exposed to it. And our ability to be able to discern truth versus falsehood is still very, very, very necessary right now. But I also am just getting a little bit tired of it, especially because some of it does end up being a distraction, right? It's sort of like, okay, so we know that we can't trust the government. We know that we actually are being lied to. We know what the purpose is of mainstream media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, now what are we going to do about it? What is actually being called for? Why is this happening from a higher level? And what do we do about it? Obviously, the whole discussion around sovereignty and getting out of a codependent relationship with the government is huge. Is huge. To be able to realize, these false choices, false dichotomies that are being presented time and time and time again with the state of this polarization of, us versus them and this side versus that side. And for us to understand just right there that the call is for us to step into a higher level of consciousness, to understand that whenever things are that polarized, it's presenting us with a false choice of two options, and those are your only two choices. And you have to pick one, and one is right and the other is wrong. And this is just like how much longer are we going to fall for this? How much longer are we going to just continue to participate? And so, there has been a level of frustration for me, and I know a lot of people, we're human, those of us who have been awake and aware for a while and whatever, even if you just woke up in 2020, it doesn't matter. But it's like there is a level of frustration of like, okay, what are we going to do with it? You know what I mean? And so my specialty is relationships. That's where I'm focused. That's my lane. But each and every one of us have, a zone of genius in these different domains that we need to be able to come together and share our wisdom, right? Whether that's completely evolving the state of health or economics or like whatever it is, right? We need to be able to do this work. And so I often say in a little bit of a playful way, but also very serious, that polarity integration, which is like so present in the work I do, is literally the answer to all the world's problems, which is being able to hold the tension of opposites and to realize the answer is never just one of these two false choices. It's always an integration. It's always a brand new third way, which represents an expansion of consciousness. And so it's a big topic. I talk about it quite a bit, right? I mean, even just the last podcast episode and tons of my public teachings, I speak about this pretty constantly. You might have heard me say it. But polarity integration is huge. And I feel like those of us who already are out of the box thinkers should be more equipped even to just embrace this mentality of like, it's not either or, right? It's usually this both and thing. And so I talk about it, yeah, even in the video that I just posted on YouTube where I talk about the marriage of love and sex and how that was divorced and how we need to bring these two things together. I speak quite a bit about polarity integration as it relates to that topic. and talk you through how it actually works on a practical level. So, I just wanted to say again, it's our time. Those of us who can think outside of the box, who have these new solutions, because we certainly can't do it the old way. We just can't, especially as it relates to relationships. I just posted this on Instagram. The old way of relationships is dying. There is no other option anymore for it to carry forward, right? For those of us who actually have lived experience of the fact that whatever you call it, God, spirit, the universe is not going to allow, like literally not going to allow the old paradigm of relationships to continue on anymore. It will not. There is not a choice, right? We don't have a choice anymore. We have to start to actually step in to co-creating the new paradigm of relationships. And it's not going to magically appear. It's not just going to magically appear when we wake up one day and we can actually step in, right? We actually are co-creating it right now. And the people who come to me individually or in groups, I can assure you, this is what gives me so much hope and faith in humanity. We're literally living it and building it right now. And so if you're here for this path of relationships, you want to be involved somehow. Doesn't have to be with me, right? I trust the people who come are meant to be here. But I can just assure you that like we have to actually step up to the plate, not being perfect. Okay. It's like the bridge phase between the old and the new is this very delicate phase of like, what in the hell are we doing? Right? Like, this is why I have a map, I have a vision. That's why the community is called the Visionaries. And I know through devotion to this path of relationships for the past 12 years, I already know some of the keys and the principles and the things that are being called for. Like, I will bet my life on it. There are certain things that I can really own with authority, and I give very, very freely in my work that I put out there. Whether it's the podcast or Substack, I have written and spoken incessantly about it. And so it's already out there, but we also have to be able to come together and actually do the work internally and then in relationships to be able to truly bring this into fruition, because it really is, it rests squarely on us. And so at the end of the day, it does require personal responsibility and stepping up to the plate, but also it's a great honor. It's a great honor, right? We are the cycle breakers. We're the ones who are going first. And so there's unique challenges and it's not always easy, but I personally can't do it any other way, right? And so a lot of people who come to me, we have to accept and own that this is part of why we're here on the planet. And so the good news is that, number one, it's our time. So it's our time to be able to actually step up to the plate, to shine, to be seen, to bring our gifts forward. And we have to do it in community. And so there's so many different ways to get in touch with this work. Individually, you can work with me, but I'm also really focused today on the groups and the group aspect. And so check the links in the show notes if you want to be connected with this work, with this path, with this community, and stay connected, right? Maybe now is not the best time for you to jump in, but like there's so much to come this year in 2026 and moving forward. So much love, such big hugs to all of you who have never fit in. And I will tell you that now is our time. So it's so exciting. Okay, talk to you soon.